let's move on now to the next agenda item, which is motion number 2024-08, Wiltshire's Rivers. This motion is from Councillor Robert MacNaughton and Councillor Ashley O'Neill on pages 733, 733, is there something? 734 in your summons. Councillor MacNaughton, I invite you to move this motion.
Oh, thank you. My eyes aren't very good. Thank you, Chair. And now for something completely different. And I'm more the maverick councillor. I was elected in February, I think, and I have ideas that come from other places. And this is about water. It's about poo. Perry, I'm not going to go further, but this is about poo in our rivers. And I feel very strongly that that poo needs to be taken out of our rivers.
Can you just move the motion and then I will ask for a seconder and then you can speak to it.
I move the motion. Shall I sit down now? Look, I don't know what's...
Thank you.
My first time.
Councillor O'Neill seconded it. So, Councillor MacNaughton, you've got up to 5 minutes to talk about poo.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. So, I feel very strongly about poo in our rivers. I think there's a step change happening in our society. I'm not the only one who feels the way which I do. You're aware of groups like Surface Against Sewage. You're aware of certain celebrities who've been out there as well. There's a general feeling of disgust about the poo in our rivers. I knock on doors. I'm a Lib Dem, so I go out and meet people. Quite often, people in my town know me as the river man, and they talk to me about poo in the rivers. So this is not coming out of left field or whatever. We were talking about Alice in Wonderland before. This is deeply felt by large numbers of our population. My background is that I spent 10 years in a druid grove where I can put my hands in the air in the middle of the rain and go, ah, and other people could do the same. So I have a great respect for nature. I've always loved nature. I've always loved the woods. I've always loved the rivers. I believe rivers to be living beings. Some of you might concur with that, some of you might not. I also believe they have sentience. So that's where people, drift away from this argument. They have sentience in the same way as your plants at home have sentience. When you water them, you talk to them. They do respond to your presence, your cats as well, your dogs as well. Quite how we exchange our sentience with theirs is a different matter. But I believe that we're in a situation now where we need to celebrate nature. The butterfly count this year was 50% down. Winged insects, as a lot of you know, 60% down. We need to look after our fish as well, be it for fly fishermen or for the brown trout in Cllr. And we need to look after our rivers. The background to this in Cllr is that in 2019, I saw an article in the National Trust saying 84% of the rivers in England are in bad health. I think that percentage has increased. I said, we've got to do something about it. So I contacted Ian and Sam, and we formed a group. That group went through COVID, and in November 21, we held our first river festival. At the river festival, we declared the rights of the River Marden. The River Marden is an 8-mile-long stretch that rises in the area of outstanding natural beauty and goes down to Chippenham. We declared the rights. I sent all that documentation to James Gray, and James Gray, who was our MP at the time, was very favourable, very supportive, and talked about Danny Kruger, in fact, who had also was supporting the idea of looking after our rivers. So it was supported by James Gray, supported by Danny Kruger. This has popular input behind it. In 23, we did our first river blessing. I invited our local Bishop Andrew of Ramsbury, to come because I'd met him before, and he said he's very much in favour of blessing our rivers. I asked a friend who's a shamanic practitioner. I gave them both a pair of waders. I said, why don't you get in the river and sing to each other? And they did. and there were 80 people there watching, people from the town that were watching. This year, 24, I had the same thing. I asked the bishop to get into the river. It was a different shamanic lady who was with him. We had mayors from various places, including Gavin was there. Ian was there, who just did one of his first times out of hospital. And there must have been at least 100, 120 people there. This stuff is popular. This stuff is liked by the people of our towns and villages, and it needs our support. I'm not going to go into bashing water companies. All I'm going to say is that we as a council need to work with Wessex Water, Southern Water and Thames Water. We need to work with their management to determine or to understand more what are they going to do to reduce the poo in our rivers. We know that it won't be done overnight. We know it's to do with infrastructure. We know infrastructure costs money. We've been working with the heads of the water companies. We can at least share our concerns. They're not in their silos in the battles. They're working with Wiltshire Council, and perhaps when other authorities are aware of what we're doing here, they might copy it. The second thing is, having worked with the heads of the water companies, we then look at funding. Funding is always a critical first part of funding is what do we pay in terms of bills. David made a comment earlier about our bills being quite low. And then there's the problem about what shareholders put into the money as well, and what the water companies what capital they can raise on the markets. The problem is, something like Wessex Water, we already pay 20% of the money we pay them goes into servicing debts.
Can you begin to wind up, please?
Thank you, I will. Thank you for reminding me. So I commend this motion to everybody. Please support it. And thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Councillor MacNaughton. I will now call on Councillor Dominic Munns. This is a relevant cabinet member if he wishes to respond to the motion at this time.
I won't, other than to say that I fully support the ambitions and the motion itself.
Okay, thank you. I now move that we debate this motion, seconded by the Vice Chairman. So all those in support of debating this motion, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say no. Any abstentions? None. Okay, that's it. So that is approved for debate. So I will now move on to ask group leaders for their comments before opening the debate to members. Councillor Richard Cllr.
Thank you, Chair. I think before I start on a assessment of the motion, whilst I'm not sure I agree that rivers share sentience, you know my love of all things Latin and Roman. The Romans did. Every river had its own god or goddess. So who knows? Stranger things have happened. I think this is a really good motion. We've had a really confused picture with national legislation around how to tackle pollution in rivers, how to tackle nitrates and phosphates. And we've had some pretty incoherent approaches caused by Natural England and some very well-intentioned ideas and some European Union legislation that's resulted essentially in us putting all of the onus on new housing development for fixing the problem of nutrients going into rivers, which is nonsense, because the largest single contributor is agricultural runoff, and then it's the rest of us, existing houses. We've had underinvestment in our sewage system and our water system, and as a result, whilst the charts that you can look up to show sewage spills can look really scary, and if you actually analyse them, many of them are simply storm overflow. There's no evidence whether there is or isn't sewage, and if there is, it's incredibly dilute. Some of them are really serious raw sewage going into rivers, and we shouldn't be letting that happen. So I think this motion is a really good idea. I think it's us saying to the water companies in our area, okay, step up and actually meet your legislative responsibilities under law and tell us how you're going to do it. I think it's great.
Thank you, Councillor Cllr. Councillor Ian Thorne.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm very happy to support the motion. I thank those who have been involved, along with Robert, in drafting the motion. Robert is a force for good in many, many areas, and particularly in relation to rivers, poo in rivers, and just encouraging people to embrace rivers, whether they feel rivers are sentient or not, and whatever the Romans did and felt, etc., etc. So I pay tribute at this time to Robert MacNaughton for all the work that he does, for the numerous water blessings that he organises, that he drags all of us along to, and certainly the vision of the Bishop of Ramsbury with the shamanic practitioner, both standing in the river, singing at each other, was something that no one should miss, frankly, at some point in their lives. So, Robert, thank you for what you do. I think the motion is a fantastic motion. It's a step in the right direction. One has to hope that the water companies and indeed Oftwat will play their part, but no one can underestimate the crisis that we face in terms of the extraordinary damage we're doing to our environment and the way we're treating our water courses and our water system, our green infrastructure, if you like. So I'm hopeful that we can metaphorically all join hands together on this motion this afternoon and give it our fulsome support. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Thorne. Councillor John Hubbard. Okay, thank you. Councillor Ricky Rogers? Nothing? Okay, so I will now open the item to general debate. Councillor David Vigar.
But I did want to say something, so I apologise for arising yet again. I think it's great to have this motion, especially part two, the requesting a meeting with executives of the 3 water companies that serve Wiltshire. I think this whole issue has been turned into a terrible political football, or should I say political waterfall, over the last few years. And if Wiltshire could be the place where there was some real dialogue and engagement and progress and understanding about this, I think that would actually put us on the map. The situation with water is confused. The water companies have not been blameless in this. They have run up debts, particularly in taking out large loans when the interest rates were low, only to be beached when they've got higher. And now they're paying the cost of that, particularly Thames Water, and paying what might be regarded as excessive dividends to their shareholders, but that's what water companies do. Private companies pay dividends, and so they can't be blamed necessarily for that. What I do note is that, for example, Wessex Water wanted to invest between now and 2030 5.2 billion in our system, and Oftwat is only allowing it to invest 3.7 billion. So Oftwat's obsession with keeping bills low is often what stopped us investing to stop those sewage outflows. And I do think the discussing how the burden, as point 3 says, of necessary investment is addressed is a really important point. We get our water in this country for about £1 a day. It's about 1% of the average wage. If you went to somewhere like Mozambique or Tanzania, where people don't have fresh running water, would they be prepared to pay 1% of their income? I think they would, and probably quite a lot more. So I think we need to get a proper understanding of what is the fair and right level for the bill payers to pay, and how we can actually get the investment together. And if Wiltshire can be a place where we have that dialogue, and we can actually set an example to the rest of the nation, then that's a great thing to do, and I support the motion fully. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Vigar. Councillor Ian Blair-Pilling.
Thank you, Chair. 3 quick points. As an agnostic, I'm not that interested. In fact, I'd rather not be hearing about people's belief systems. But hey, if it brings attention and focuses people on it, well done. And thank you for that. As the portfolio holder for public health and with a daughter who's very keen on wild swimming, I'm absolutely for you. My third point is that this is all about rivers. I don't want to put forward any amendments. I just would ask people to take this into account when they do get to meet. It isn't just about what's in the rivers. This last winter, one of my villages, Enford, had somewhere like 10 inches, foot deep of water right the way across the middle of the village, full of poo. Well, full, but and which then went into somebody's house in this. So that hadn't even got to the river, and that's because of the system of sewage and the groundwater and the river combining to, it had nowhere to go and they spilled over. So please don't think it's just in the rivers, it actually gets into the communities by virtue of flooding.
Thank you. Councillor Dick Budden.
Chair, thank you. Just, I'm all in favour of this as a motion. I would just like to ask everybody present to reflect that this is part of a big picture which is about water, of which rivers are a very important part. There are a number of other components, and just to share some of the thoughts that were going through my head. The focus of this motion is about getting the water companies to invest to segregate rainwater from effluent. Effluent from houses and residences, of course, doesn't only come through the water company treatment plants. It can also come from septic tanks, for example. So part of the same picture is the work that we're doing, or the council is doing already within the Avon catchment with its Revamp Your Tank programme to encourage people to replace or upgrade their septic tanks. And that, of course, is driven by Natural England's regulation and the pressure to deal with phosphates in the rivers. Councillor Cllr made the point that the biggest source of pollution in the rivers is actually agriculture. In the south of the county, on the River Wylie and on the Nadder, and on the Chalk Valley also, farmer clusters are now measuring their impacts on the rivers with their own monitoring systems. So the point I'm really trying to bring out is that all of these initiatives are going on and we need to see them as a whole. By the way, together with the proposal which is in the local plan, which I referred to earlier, to drive forward on reducing consumption of water in new houses when they get built. And I would put it to Councillor Blair Pilling that if he's the man responsible for this, what we need is an overarching plan and a strategy for water in our county, which incorporates this motion and this initiative on rivers, but is part of a bigger strategy to ensure that there's adequate water supply, adequate water treatment, and adequate addressing of all the different sources of effluent for the future.
Thank you, Councillor Budden. Councillor Martin Smith.
Thank you, Chair. I fully support this motion. I help run a small environmental group called Sustainable Shurston. And we've been monitoring the water quality in the upper reaches of the Shurston Avon. Well, actually, it joins the Bristol Avon, but obviously rises close to Shurston. We've been doing that for over a year now. We have both nitrates and phosphates, even in the upper reaches of the river. So goodness knows what it's like downstream. Our resident expert reckons that the water quality has been impacted by not only sewage outflows, even up there, but also runoff from agriculture. And they're responsible, I think, for in equal measure to the pollution in the river. I've been very interested in what's going on at the River Nadder. I just wonder whether there's going to be any scope in the future for doing something similar on the Bristol Avon catchment, because obviously that's another river that's potentially in trouble here. I'm very pleased that not only are we looking at the water companies here, but we've also got the mention of Oftwat in item 3 there, because I think they are a regulator who's been completely asleep at the wheel, and there is a lot of pressure applied to them. In fact, the term regulatory capture has been associated with them in that they are essentially being in league with the private water companies over many years and doing their bidding. So I think they need a complete revamp, but as much pressure as we can give to them as possible, I would very much welcome. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. I think the actions that are going on the Wylie, Nadder and the Ebble It's because it's farming in protected landscape of the Cranbourne Chase National Landscape, which is where the funding is coming from. Councillor Ashley O'Neill.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I don't intend to speak for too long or go over points that others have already made, but I just wanted to say I was delighted to work with Robert in a cross-party way on the wording that we've got in front of us today, and I hope that this motion sort of speaks to everybody and they can relate with what we're trying to achieve here, whether that's through local issues that they've had in their own areas or through awareness in the national or local press. And just on the specifics for Wiltshire, I think if I look at the sort of Wessex Water side in my area, I know that some good progress has been made and that there has been investment that's gone into sort of improving the situation, and they have been quite good at communicating some of their plans, particularly to us as councillors and to residents. But this is still a very important issue, and the issue of pollution in our rivers does remain a problem, not just in Wiltshire, but all over the country. And I'm sure others in the room will have experience in their own local areas of issues with discharge and may wish to speak to those. But I would urge you all to support this motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sam Pearce-Kearney.
Thank you, Chair. I've always found Wessex Water to be responsive to the needs of our residents, whether it's addressing sewer issues, restoring water connections, or providing assistance during floods. For that reason, ahead of this meeting, I contacted Wessex Water, and as others have said, they informed me about their investment plans, and they said they welcomed the opportunity to work with the council. So I will be supporting this motion.
Thank you. Councillor Nick Puntis.
Thank you, Chair. It would be remiss of me as the portfolio holder for flooding to not pick up on this. And as Councillor Blair Pilling alluded to, one of the main problems with flooding and with the heavy rain that we've had for a while now is the storm overflows are discharging into rivers, and that's where we need to see a significant amount of investment, which, to be fair, they are looking at, but this sort of motion will really shine the light on them, and I think it's only going to help. The operational flood working group that I chair and Councillor Davis chairs in the south, they come to those meetings and they're aware of the issues. But I think that any opportunity we have to promote this is good. I was disappointed that I couldn't attend, and thank you for the invitation to the Calm River Blessing, but I invite both yourself and your seconder, Councillor O'Neill, to Chippenham. But unless you do it while swimming, I would wait until the river project has happened in Chippenham and the water levels have dropped to a point that you can maybe in the summer be able to do it properly. And, it'd be great to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Matthew Dean.
My comments have been made by others.
Councillor Nick Holder.
Thank you. I just wanted to congratulate you on bringing this motion forward. I think it's fantastic. The only piece of advice I would give is when you're having the conversations, and I don't wish to amend the motion, is that we already have a really close working relationship with the Wessex Rivers Trust, who look after water quality across, not as a statutory bodies, but they help support our local communities in terms of our water quality across all of the rivers that flow in and out of Wiltshire, as well as out of the New Forest and down into Hampshire and down to the south coast. I would urge you, when you're having your engagement, to actually bring them along to your meetings and see what advice they can give you as a charitable body to help with those discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Jackie Lay.
Thank you. I mean, I don't often talk in full council because I normally get involved at scrutiny levels. But although I support the motion and it's good idea that we have this discussion. It isn't just about the water authorities, because why is this pollution getting into our environments? And it is coming through from stormwater. I know in my community that the stormwater that is generating the flooding out of my sewage treatment plant is coming from the highways. Highways are discharging all of their water into a system that goes into a storm drain that goes into the sewage treatment plant. So it's not just the water authorities that we need to be talking to, but we need to be talking to planners about attenuation and holding water back. We have plenty of water. We shouldn't be controlling water that people are using, because there's plenty of brown water around, which we should have in our planning system as to how we hold brown water to give to our new houses. But we also have the issue with the Environment Agency in controlling the dredging of our rivers. A lot of the minor rivers are the responsibility of the landowners now. And again, perhaps we need to get them on board. So I think we need to be looking at the much wider picture as to why we have these issues, and we need to get everybody on board so that we control what happens to the quality of our water, so that we can all enjoy it, not only ourselves, but wildlife as well. Not saying wildlife, sorry, but the wildlife and the flora and fauna in our communities. So I don't know how we do that, as to whether we follow on from this motion to bring that in.
Thank you, Councillor Lay. I think that's the last person who's requested to speak. So I'll ask Councillor Munns, as a Cabinet member, do you have any final comments to make before we move to the vote? And then I'll come back to Councillor MacNaughton.
No, thank you, Chair.
Councillor MacNaughton, do you have any, as mover of the motion, do you have any final comments before we move to the vote?
Yes, Chair, I'd like to thank Richard, who I went to first of all to talk about it with, and he suggested I was cross-party, so I asked Ashley. I'd like to thank Ashley as well for joining in. And I'd like to thank David as well, who was very, very, very helpful and had a lot of influence on the motion. And there's a colleague of mine in Khan as well who contributed. So I'd like to thank you all for your support and all of you for your comments.
Thank you very much. In accordance with the Constitution, then there will be a recorded vote on this item. So please, can you do the usual on your console, whether you're voting for, against, or abstaining? That's unanimous. Well done. That's well done. Thank you. Let's move on. So the